This is The Bandwagon, a podcast about baseball and bare-chested men dancing to a second-rate cover of a gay Swedish anthem. I'm Hannah Keyser, a baseball writer at Yahoo Sports, joined as always by Zach Crizer, also a baseball writer at Yahoo Sports. I actually don't know why Dancing on Your Own is known to be a gay anthem, but that is both how it is known and what Wikipedia confirms for me. I haven't listened to the lyrics that closely, to be honest.
Well, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if it's about the lyrics or if it's just a great song.
Yeah?
It is both, but I will say Citizens Bank Park, home of the Phillies, they really have a preference for covers that are worse than the original. They were also playing the bad, boring country music guy cover of Fast Car by Tracy Chapman instead of the actual Fast Car by Tracy Chapman.
Ooh, you know
So
what?
they're really all in on the second-rate covers.
I'm going to say it's sexism. Just putting it out there.
Oh,
Put
it
it
is
out
two
there.
men covering two songs
Two
by
men
women.
covering.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they should. That's what they should have done between last year and this year, is just quietly swap out which version of Dancing on My Own they were using. But they didn't. That's okay. We'll get to that. We have each hit the road. You're currently in your house, your apartment.
Yes.
But very briefly, not to be spending even a single night there.
No.
But we've taken one CS apiece. So you're going to tell me about the NL, and I will tell you about the AL. But before we do that, got a little bit of news to get to. It is the season of, in addition to the postseason, it is the changing of the GM season. I couldn't think of a good way to say that. Teams are firing their GMs, or
Executive silly season.
They're encouraging them to leave by offering them insulting offers. They are failing to find replacements for the GMs that they fired. The biggest news was that Kim Ng, the Marlins general manager and the first female GM of a major American male sport, as well as, I believe, the first East Asian GM of a baseball team, at least, Kim Ng and the Marlins have parted ways. So the Marlins themselves announced this, and in their announcement, they said that they had picked up her option. She had a 3-year deal with an option for the fourth year. 2024 would have been the fourth year. They picked up her option. She declined it. It was a mutual option. That makes it sound like she wanted to leave. I don't think that is necessarily what happened based on the further reporting that has come out. Rich Rowley of The Athletic had a good story about this, sort of detailing some of the ways in which Ng felt, quote, according to sources, this isn't like a quote from Ng, but a quote from the story, felt, quote, like she was being stripped of her power and underappreciated. And the headline example of that has since come out is that they were trying to hire a president of baseball operations over her. So she is the GM. Some teams just have GMs. Some teams have GMs and POBOs, in which case the GM is not the head of baseball operations. He is the person who reports to the head of baseball operations, who is the POBO. It is tricky because her title would not have changed, but that would have been effectively a demotion. She's currently calling the shots, although maybe not as much as she wanted to be, which is an earlier issue. And if they were going to hire someone over her, well, if you're the boss and they're hiring someone to be your boss, you're no longer the boss. That's a demotion. So she left. It is not clear she has another job lined up, but she did leave.
I'm sure she does not have one lined up yet, but yeah, this is... it's honestly a similar scenario, theoretically. It was kind of a preemptive strike at the similar scenario that happened with Alex Anthopoulos and the Blue Jays, which is he was a GM who had taken that team to the playoffs very memorably, and the Blue Jays hired Mark Shapiro over top of him as president of baseball operations, and I think they intended to keep Anthopoulos there and have him work for Shapiro. That did not sit well with Anthopoulos. He resigned. He worked in kind of a underling capacity for the Dodgers for a year or two, and then wound up taking over the Braves, and we know how that has gone. So there's a possibility this ends up with Kim Ng finding a better situation for her talents. I don't know that it will be immediate. You know, there are jobs open. There are teams that could use her help, certainly. The immediate connections were maybe she'll apply for the Red Sox job, which we can talk about that job in a second. The other connections make a little bit less sense. There was speculation of would she want to go to the Mets, but they already have a president of baseball operations, so it would be stepping into the number 2 role that she just wanted to not deal with. So that one seems unlikely. The one thing I saw floated that I am interested in is the Chicago White Sox. She worked for the White Sox for a while earlier in her career. They hired first-time GM Chris Getz, an internal hire after dismissing Kenny Williams and Rick Hahn. I'd be interested in seeing if she had maybe a chance to become the president of baseball operations there and oversee Getz or work with Getz in some capacity. That seems like maybe the best fit of the teams that are in flux right now. It could be that there are more teams that will be in flux, but that was the one that stuck out to me.
Yeah, the Mets thing, I wouldn't totally rule out, just because, again, back to Britt's reporting, there did seem to be some other ways in which she felt disempowered sort of at the Marlins in a way that would not be as big of an issue if she was stepping into a situation in which it was going to be collaborative, and she would have to talk to David Stearns and find out if they were on the same page. I think we should talk a little bit about, and not in try to not do this tritely, talk a little bit about the sort of historical significance of Kim Ng as the first female GM, and then the Marlins moving on from that. The discourse around this has been many layers deep already as to whether or not you're allowed to move on from a woman that you hire to a historic role. Of course, but it is tricky to figure out how to discuss this, because it's she shouldn't get more chances if they really felt like she did a bad job because she's a woman. But I do think you have to, if you're the Marlins or if you're the owner, you have to give some thought to are we giving her a fair chance, or did we just like the idea of hiring her and then get impatient? And the same could be said. I mean, whatever. We had the same conversation. It's not I've seen some people say oh, no one would be mad that she got fired if she was, or not fired. She didn't get fired. She got pushed out, whatever, or stepped down. No one would be saying that if she was a man, but that's not true, because people said that about Chaim Bloom very recently. People were pretty indignant on his behalf as well. So, but you know what I mean? So I think there's an interesting situation with Kim Ng, because she's not young. She waited a really long time to get this opportunity, and regardless of how you feel about her getting this opportunity, that long lag time in which she did not get the opportunity is pretty obviously the result of her being a woman. I mean, she was widely known to be overqualified. In some ways, I think, I'm going to tread carefully here, that she got screwed over by sexism, in the sense that she would have been better qualified 10 years ago in some ways, because I thought this was interesting from Britt's story. Ng, and this is again quoting Ng, and owner Bruce Sherman, whose sources close to the situation say is a huge proponent of analytics, had different ideas regarding personnel decisions and where some of the team's resources should be allotted. That sets it up as if Bruce Sherman's interest in analytics is in opposition to what Kim Ng wanted to do. And I worry that now she finds herself in a tricky position where she neither has the years of experience of a Dave Dombrowski, by virtue of having not been given an opportunity until 2020, but is also not a 29-year-old with brand new ideas based on having studied, I don't know, statistics in college at Yale 5 years ago, however long ago that would have been. You know what I mean? And that is the result of her being denied opportunities earlier in her career because of the lack of progressiveness of the industry. And so I do think in how the Marlins handled her career, they did need to give some credence to the fact that and again, I don't know how she did. Maybe she was the hugest proponent of analytics and we're stereotyping based on age and experience or whatever. But it does feel like they benefited from the positive press of hiring her. And as often happens when people laud themselves for having the first woman of something, that then they find they want it to be as if they didn't just do that. once they're in the job. And it's like, well, yeah, there might be some ramifications to the fact that no one has done this before. Perhaps she doesn't have as much GM experience as they would have wanted someone that age to be. And so it takes a little bit longer for her to get her feet wet and figure out how she wants to run the team. And then once she does it successfully and brings them to the postseason, she expects a longer contract going forward than the 1-year option they gave her. You know what I mean? Does that make some sense? Am I walking that line?
Yeah. I mean, I think just from a baseline woman or man's scenario, she just took the Marlins to the playoffs. That's an accomplishment the Marlins should not be taking lightly. They don't go there very often.
Right.
They had a lot of pitching injuries that she built a team that weathered it. We don't know the internal workings of how that operation was running, but we have some indication that this season, their most successful season in a while, was the one where she had assumed the most control. They had a player development executive, Gary Denbo, who left in 2022, who had been there a very long time and held a lot of sway. And there was reporting that, maybe he was part of the power dynamic that Kim Ng had to kind of weather to make her imprint on the club. And they made it all the way to the playoffs this year with seemingly Kim Ng having the most control she'd had. So I think it's, maybe it's a miscalculation if we're being the most generous to the Marlins, a miscalculation that she would accept someone over top of her. I think more realistically, they probably could have said, hey, good job getting us to the playoffs. We're promoting you to baseball of operations, and we'd like you to hire someone in the GM role who fits these other qualities we're looking for. I think that would have been a much more reasonable way to handle this, and we don't know exactly how it went down, but clearly that was not the pitch.
Clearly that was not the pitch, and I think the fact that they didn't offer her another longer deal, which is another point that Britt brought up, speaks to the fact that they just weren't that interested in rewarding her because she was going to be a lame duck GM. So that, right, I think always when teams move on from GMs, they are being in some ways impatient because it takes a long time. People are still saying hey, these are Matt Klentak's Phillies who are succeeding now. The work of a GM takes a long time to come to fruition. And so if you are unhappy with the most recent results, which again did include the Marlins getting to the playoffs, but if you're unhappy with the most recent results, you do kind of have to take a wider lens view as an owner as to whether or not it's that GM's fault. And I just think in this particular circumstance, for both the reasons you cited and given her history and her unique role as a woman, a little bit of patience would have been merited. This is her first year running the team, and you wanted to take this step of hiring this person who had decades of experience working for lots of different teams, but not in this particular capacity. If you thought she was worth hiring 3 years ago, I don't know how you change your opinion based on how the past 3 years of the Marlins went. Okay. Where should she go? Potentially the Red Sox. They can't seem to find a new GM. They have been interested in, so this is a public list compiled from various reporting of people who do not want to be the GM of the Red Sox. Dodgers GM Brandon Gomes, Phillies GM Sam Fuld, Twins President of Baseball Operations Derek Falvey, former Rangers President of Baseball Operations John Daniels, former Astros GM and current Rays employee James Click.
Blue Jays employee.
Blue Jays, sorry. Other AL East team. Thad Levine is interested, and he is interviewed.
Yeah.
Okay, what do you make of all of these people turning down the opportunity to interview or withdrawing after they've interviewed? Is it a reflection of how undesirable the Red Sox GM job is, or do we just like to have that narrative or like to have some kind of meaning to what is in fact? Because now I'm this is what happened with the Mets job too. So maybe this happens more than we realize, and now these things are just coming out more.
I think there's probably a little bit more to the Red Sox job being not undesirable, but sort of stepping onto a trap door when it's no longer a trap. Everyone knows about it. they keep firing GMs who have success, or in Chaim Bloom's case, GMs who do the exact thing they were brought in to do before they get to, 4 or 5 years at the helm, which is just a very short time to make your mark in that level position. The other thing that, this is reporting from, I believe, the Athletics' Tyler Kepner is the first one who reported this. Alex Cora, the manager, seems to have a chokehold on the power in that organization and reportedly is even interested in being the GM himself, which is not something you'd want to step into of, your most significant direct report seemingly has more power than you with ownership and also wants the job. That doesn't seem ideal. So I'm sure that a lot of people would still be interested in running the Red Sox baseball operations department, but I think there is something to the idea that the Red Sox have diminished the talent pool available to them by sort of making these knee-jerk firings and by seemingly having some sort of power dynamic that is discouraging to potential executives.
I do think, though, there's always that situation. It feels like whenever there's a GM job available, we're like, oh, but it comes with all of this baggage, like the team is bad or the owner just impulsively fired someone who was doing that job before. It's like, that's how it became available. Unless you're Dave Dombrowski, you're probably not getting brought in to a situation where they're like, all we want you to do is sign expensive free agents and enjoy the ride to the World Series. So I think... Because it's like, I'm having such deja vu about covering the Mets search for a GM where we're like, I don't know, because there's been all these GMs that they've been cycling through and they're in a weird spot. And like, I just think which is not to say that everything you're saying about the Red Sox isn't true. It's like, that is in fact the context and the circumstances that people who would be considering this job are going to have to consider. That was not a great sentence. But whether or not I don't think it will prove uniquely prohibitive is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I don't think it will be uniquely prohibitive. I will say the Mets are kind of their own little thing. I can think of lots of jobs that should have been scary. Like the Braves GM got banned from baseball for life, and everyone's like, yeah, I'll take that job. I mean,
well, they're planning on not misusing their international funds. Like,
that seems like a much...
You have control over that as the GM. You don't have control over whether or not you work for, say, Artie Moreno.
No,
Perry's fine. Perry, as far as we know, is fine. I just meant like there's always GM jobs become available because
something has gone awry.
Because something has gone awry, and that seat is suddenly open. Maybe Thad Levine will take it.
Maybe. Thad Levine, by the way, I don't know if we said this. He's the Twins GM. He is number 2 there to Derek Falvey.
He's number 2 to Derek Falvey. They've worked together for a very long time. He's been Falvey's number 2 since November 2016. They seem like they're doing well this year, at least. All right. One more bit of news before we actually get to the postseason, which is that Trevor May officially retired and took the opportunity of his official retirement, which I believe he announced on a Twitch stream, or at least this forthcoming statement was relayed via Twitch stream. Took the occasion of his retirement to tell us how you really feel about the A's owner, John Fisher. I'm going to read this statement now, and it'll be bleeped. What if it'll be bleeped. There'll be some bleeps. Whoever edits this, get your bleep finger ready. All right. Now that my retirement is official, to the A's organization and every single person who's a part of it, I love you all. Every single one of you, except for one guy. And we all know who that guy is. Sell the team, dude. Let someone who actually takes pride in the things they own something. There's actually people who give a shit about the game. Let them do it. Take mommy and daddy's money somewhere else, dork. And also, if you're going to be a greedy own it. There's nothing weaker than being afraid of cameras. So that's one thing I really struggled with this year, was not just eviscerating that guy. Do what you're going to do, bro. Whatever. You're a billionaire. They exist. You guys have all the power. You shouldn't have any because you haven't earned any of it. But anyway, whatever. The reality is you got handed everything you have, and now you're too soft to stand in front of fans and the team. Sorry, I'm reading from a statement that had like some things replaced. And take responsibility for anything you've done. You're putting hundreds, if not thousands of people out of work that have worked somewhere for decades, and you haven't acknowledged that at all. Just be better. That's all we're asking. just be a human being. Did he say anything new? Not really. But but it's coming from someone who played for the baseball team this year, so that's interesting. I don't know that we could say it any better than Trevor did. That's how people feel about John Fisher. I will just say that, we'll move on. I love that he specifically called out the cowardice of making these plans to move the team to Vegas without ever publicly addressing the media, the fans, whatever. Because I think you're right. I think he has the right, Trevor May takes the right attitude and tactic here of being like, baseball teams have owners, and thanks to them, they get funded and whatever, and we can all enjoy this sport. So it's like, yeah, you could do what you want, I guess, because you're writing the checks. But like, it is something that people have a lot of emotional feelings about, if not also like, personal, logistical, financial investment in the form of working there. And so taking some responsibility, some culpability for what you do with that organization should be like, there's very little requirements of owning a baseball team. There's very little requirements of being a billionaire. Your money earns you lots and lots of leeway. And the little bit of lack of leeway that it earns you should be like, if you're doing something that's going to affect a lot of people, you do have to answer for it. Should we talk about the postseason?
Let's talk about the playoffs.
All right. You are covering the NLCS. Both, we should say, we're recording at an opportune time on purpose. Didn't happen accidentally. We planned it this way because both of these series are currently 2 games deep. The ALCS Game 3 is tonight. The NLCS Game 3 is tomorrow night. But right now we're 2 games deep, and they are both 2-0.
Yes. We are in the postseason of nobody having a tie series ever.
No tie series ever. And not even really very many close games. And the games that end up close have been less close. I'm like now speaking in like broad swaths because there have been a lot of games. Even the games that have ended up close have been less close than they've seemed, in that there have been very few lead changes. Like there have been leads that were whittled away at but held, but very few games that have ended 5-4. It's not like the team that won came back. They just had 5 runs and then the other team scored some runs, but not enough. All right. You're covering the NLCS. We're going to start there.
So the Phillies are looking pretty unstoppable.
So the Phillies.
It was a series coming in where you had the Phillies, who had taken out the Atlanta Braves, best team in baseball, in 4 games. And you had the Diamondbacks, who had not lost yet this postseason, had taken out the Dodgers in pretty decisive fashion. And the first 2 games were in Philadelphia, so you got to take that into account. But the Diamondbacks started their 2 best pitchers, Zach Gallen and Merrill Kelly, and especially for Gallen, it went poorly. And the Phillies just homered a lot in the early innings of both of these games and put the Diamondbacks behind and didn't really let them back in. Aaron Nola pitched game 2 for the Phillies last night and threw 6 shutout innings. Manager Rob Thompson said he would have gone out for a 7th if the Phillies had not scored so many times in the bottom of the 6th that it stretched out the time of the inning and he probably got cold. So the Phillies were too good to let Aaron Nola try for a 7th shutout inning, basically, which is pretty much the way that things have been going for the Phillies, both this October, last October. They seem to come in with really good game plans against the opposing pitchers, most of which centers on not being afraid to swing very hard at fastballs early in the count, it seems. They've taken so many of those deep. They already have 4 players with multi-homer games. It's Nick Castellanos has 2 of them, but 4 separate instances of a player having a multi-home run game, which is tied for a postseason record that seems pretty good odds that they'll break that record. So that's how things have been going for the Phillies. Bryce Harper hit a home run on his birthday and blew out his fingers like they were candles.
Saw that.
It's just a whole box of laughs for the Phillies. They are cruising right along.
Last time we recorded, the Phillies had not yet defeated the Braves. They defeated the Braves, by the way. And I understand that the Diamondbacks were undefeated in the postseason and that they were also playing very good teams. They defeated the Dodgers, like you said. But it really felt like when the Phillies eliminated the Braves again, and unexpected things happened. So, like, saying it really felt like doesn't mean anything. But it really felt like, I was like, oh, wow, all right, this Phillies team is like last year's team, but better. And last year's team went all the way to Game 6 of the World Series. So we should not let 2 games sway us too much. All postseason, I've been saying that. I'm like, man, we get to October and we really forget that sometimes teams lose a game or 2 and then win a game. Like, we're very much like, well, if they've lost a game, they can never win again. Not true. The Diamondbacks could win. Teams win 3 games in a row all the time. They win 2 games and lose a game, then win a game again a lot as well. All of these things, options available still to the Diamondbacks. However, the Phillies do look really, really, the lineup just looks so hot and so locked in. And it's like so much of what we talk about when we talk about baseball is why hitting is really hard. You know what I mean? It's like, oh my God, these guys, everyone throws 100 now, and they bring in the reliever after the 5th inning, and he's got a completely different arm slot and a different arsenal, and maybe he throws with a different hand or whatever. We talk so much about how hard hitting is, and it really is. That's the whole you fail 70% of the time, even if you're good thing. But the Phillies lineup, you mentioned the game plan. When you see their game plan and you see them succeed, you're like, wow, pitching also hard, because you do have to put it in the strike zone sometimes, or else they will just walk around the bases. And then when you put it in the strike zone, they hit it out of the ballpark. Like, that was sort of my thought watching the beginning part of yesterday's game. That was game 2, where they were still hitting homers early in the counts or whatever. And it was like, well, why don't they just not give them pitches to hit out of the ballpark? And you're like, all right, because they want to get outs. They can't just, they gotta try. Pitching also hard. How'd you like that for analysis?
Yeah, I will say one of the things that really felt like a backbreaker in game 2, if the Phillies go on to win this series, especially if they go on to win this series in, say, 4 games, maybe 5 games, one of the few hitters in this lineup who had not been red hot for the entire playoffs was Bryson Stott, the second baseman, who had a really nice year, still playing great defense, but he had been hitting about 200 in the playoffs with he really had that one grand slam against the Marlins, and other than that had not really found a lot of success with the bat in October so far. He came up against a left-handed reliever who was brought in expressly for the purpose of ending the 6th inning and letting the Diamondbacks escape with kind of they were down a few runs, but it wasn't a blowout. They had gotten Merrill Kelly through a reasonable number of innings, even though he wasn't great. It set them up okay for the rest of the series if they got out of that inning. Spoiler, they did not get out of that inning. Left-handed reliever comes in, Bryson Stott singles up the middle, and the Phillies bat for like another 20 minutes. They go through so many more pitchers to the point where there were 2 different guys on the roster who you were looking at thinking, well, maybe that guy will start game 4 for the Diamondbacks. And they both had to come in and mop up duty, and both got shelled. So now the Diamondbacks are stuck with a bullpen day in game 4, which does not feel like a great situation for them. Even if Brandon Pfaadt comes out and they win game 3 in Arizona, game 4 is looking like a very tough matchup for the Diamondbacks. So I just wanted to mention that one key moment. It wasn't a homer. It's one of the only runs the Phillies have scored without a home run, honestly.
Do you know why he did that? It's because he knew he would be A-okay all that time that he was not doing great. He was like, you know what? I'm living in this big blue world, my head out in outer space, and I know that I will be A-okay. I'm not
You just
worried.
sat there and Googled that while I was talking, didn't you?
Maybe. I didn't watch this game closely, so I have a question for you based on the things you just told me. Why did they use the 2 pitchers who might have started in game 4 in mop-up duty, when mop-up duty, by virtue of it being mop-up duty, could seemingly be accomplished by people who were not on your short list of potential starters for game 4?
It's possible that they weren't on the short list of starters, although I struggle to see who else would be. Maybe they always planned on running out a bullpen game in game 4. That's certainly a possibility. Torey Lovullo had not said anything about game 4 one way or the other. But I feel like it was mostly because the other bullpen arms they need for high leverage moments, they didn't want to burn in what quickly escalated to a 10-run game. and they were just trying to get through innings, and these were the guys who could give you some length in theory.
How you feeling going to Phoenix? Specifically. How you feeling? You excited? Phoenix?
It's going to be 100 degrees. It's going to be 100 degrees.
Okay, feeling
dry
hot.
heat. I have some restaurants I'm looking forward to going to. We got day game. We got a day game tomorrow on Thursday, so
day games are good.
I don't mind a little day baseball, even though it's in a dome, so you will not be seeing the sun from Chase Field. But it's an interesting series in that right now it very much feels like the unstoppable train and like some guys with a stick hoping to stop it, but maybe the Diamondbacks have some more magic up their sleeves. I'm mostly interested in seeing how long Philly can sustain this kind of like Mario superpower run that they've been on for most of the month.
They shouldn't use up all their homers. They should save some for the World Series. I feel like that's my advice to the Phillies.
What's your take?
That's my take. My advice to Major League Baseball is why don't we open the roof in some of these games that are taking place in October in places that have roofs that are mostly necessary. Well, you did say it was going to be 100. So maybe
I think I know why they're not going to do it in Arizona.
Maybe
I will
not in Arizona.
Complain.
Maybe not in Arizona, but I'm pretty annoyed that in Texas in October, the weather is apparently quite nice. It's been lovely. And they insist on having the roofs open for the workout days. And then we're all like, this is nice, beautiful. And then closing them for the games. And it's annoying. Leave the roof open. Baseball should be played outside. I hate indoor baseball, except when it is preventing us from having rainouts, which is so rare because they put the roofs in the desert. And they didn't put the roofs in the cities that frequently have rainouts.
They put a roof in Seattle.
They did put a roof in, well, they put it like an awning. The only good roof. The only good roof in baseball is the roof in Seattle. And do you know why? It's because they largely operate with it open unless it is raining and then they close it, as opposed to the ballparks in places like Texas that largely seem to keep it closed and then just open it on occasion. I don't know. Open the roofs. I say that, but then like, what if I get a little bit chilly at night? And I don't like that.
It was pretty cold in Philadelphia. Would not have minded a little bit.
I don't know if I
climate control.
I don't know if I warned you about that. So wait, we should talk about this. This was your first time covering postseason. These were your first 2 postseason games you covered, right?
For work, yes.
Yeah. Well, what else do you cover them for?
Well, I have been to postseason games, just not for work. Yes.
What was your takeaway of watching postseason games from the press box?
It's hard to separate the entire experience from specifically Philadelphia right now, which is just
so good.
Absolute madness. I mean, these people are chomping at the bit to scream at anyone who will listen. They kept doing you've heard the Wilson chant from Castaway, kind of meant to intimidate opposing players. They did that all the time. I mean, they were chanting Gallen at Zach Gallen, who is from South Jersey. They were chanting Merrill at Merrill Kelly. They were...
all right, they can stand to work on their creativity. Those are just their names.
No. Generally losing their minds at all times, especially game 1 when the home runs came so quickly. The place was unhinged the whole time. So it was great. We'll see how the intensity holds up in non-Philadelphia places, but
yeah,
it's a very different. It feels much more like a football game where you have that intensity of this one game matters so much. It changes the energy in the ballpark.
I both last year and this year have had the not quite predicament though of being like, I think it is really fun to go to games in Philly, but I am from there and revel in the opportunity to eat scrapple for breakfast before covering a postseason game. So I try not to like make every game story from Philly about how electric and exciting it is. So I appreciate you providing that insight on this particular podcast. If we are in Philadelphia for the World Series, I will pick up that mantle and talk about how great it is to go to postseason games in Philadelphia, although it is so cold. Covering the postseason in the Northeast in late October is so cold. And then your little fingers are cold and you have to type, and cold. It's such a bummer. And they start so late. That's my biggest issue. It's like, I want to be on the East Coast because it's close to home. But on the East Coast, the games start at 8, and that should be illegal. And on the West Coast, they start earlier. So that is better. And in Texas, they start somewhere in the middle, is how that goes.
This has been Geography Hour.
This has been Geography Hour. Today, I was like just Googling maps of Texas because I went from one Texas city to another, and I don't know much about the geography of Texas. And I was like, all right, yesterday I texted Jake when I was getting on the plane, my husband, and I was like, all right, gonna go fly north. I was like, I don't know which direction I'll be going, but I will land and I will still be in Texas.
That would be a great geography game, testing Hannah on which direction various like southern and midwestern cities are from one another.
Right. When I get on a plane to go from one part of the baseball series to another part, which cardinal direction am I traveling? Yeah. You know what? On that topic of ridiculous non-on-field issues that I have with this Texas series, teams need to be named after cities, not states. Because it's very frustrating to be like, Texas is up 2-0 against a little tiny part of Texas, which makes it seem so disproportionate. It's not. All right, that's all. I said this to someone, and they were like, so the Queens Mets? And I was like, fine, I didn't think this totally through. Let's talk about...
New York is a city.
New York is a city. Yeah. New York is a city. The Rangers, Texas is up, as previously established.
Texas is subsuming Houston.
Texas is subsuming Houston in more ways than one. The Rangers are 7-0 in the postseason so far. The Astros, well, when one team is winning, the other team looks not so good. But I would say that the Astros have some issues, which are Framber Valdez looks really not great right now. He had that no-hitter on the trade deadline day, and then he kind of struggled down the stretch. And I really thought, like, that's fine, whatever. He's Framber Valdez. He was just a top Cy Young finisher last year. He's been incredible in the postseason. For a young pitcher, he has a lot of postseason experience, and also he threw a no-hitter. He's capable of being really, really good. And then he just looked really shaky in his first start against the Rangers, who are kind of the Phillies. They're kind of the Phillies. They are aggressive. Corey Seager and Marcus Semien in particular, actually Corey Seager in particular, swing early a lot. Also, their lineup is, if not always incredibly deep, is currently incredibly deep. Leody Taveras, the 9-hole hitter, is having a great postseason. And so it's like a very doesn't let up type situation. And when they jump on a pitcher early, like they did with Framber Valdez in Game 2, I'm just looking this up, 4 earned runs, 5 runs, but he had the errors, so really 5 runs in 2.2 innings. It's not good. I mean, prior to this postseason, I should say, I didn't watch this game, but against the Twins, he gave up 5 runs in 4 innings, 4 1/3. Prior to this postseason, his postseason ERA last year was 1.44. His postseason ERA this year is 11.57. So that is a big issue for the Astros, because in the past they've had an abundance of starting pitching such that they've been able to put starting pitchers in the bullpen, and they still have that technically, but in the past, part of what has been so beneficial about that is that guys like Framber Valdez, who was at one time kind of like an unknown, were so much better maybe than people thought they were going to be, or more better than their reputation may have led you to believe. And without that, they don't look quite so good. Also, the lineup is not being... It's really, again, it's like 6 of one, half dozen of the other. The Rangers pitching has been incredible. So maybe the Astros lineup is bad. Maybe the Rangers pitching has just been incredible. Nathan Eovaldi is fine, I guess. I don't know what he was doing at the end of the regular season when he came back from injury and looked not good. He's fine now.
I will say about Nathan Eovaldi, they have acknowledged they rushed him back without rehab starts because they were in such a tight race. So it's possible that he was basically, at rehab start level quality in the majors, and now he's okay, and Nathan Eovaldi again.
Okay, glad you said that, because keep that concept, if not that pitcher, in mind for later.
Yes.
Nathan Eovaldi has been great. Jordan Montgomery has been so good. So he had, against Baltimore in Game 2 of the ALDS, he gave up 4 runs, but then they went on. The Rangers lineup was incredible, and they won 11-8, and it never looked. That's one of those games that like literally looked closer even at 11-8 than it ever felt, because they scored 11 runs really quickly. But other than that, he's given up no runs and pitched pretty deep. In the wild card, he had 7 shutout innings. In Game 1 of the CS, he had 6 1/3 shutout innings. We should say Game 1 of the CS was the first game in the postseason this year that both pitchers went at least 6 innings. Justin Verlander got the start for the Astros, and I think gave up 2 runs, but was good. Not good enough, but good enough to go into the 6th. So that was something. Okay, so yeah, Jordan Montgomery, Nathan Eovaldi, really, really good. That'll be, if it is a Rangers-Phillies World Series, it'll be very fun to watch Jordan Montgomery and Nathan Eovaldi versus Aaron Nola and Zach Wheeler. 4 pitchers who have all been like really strong pillars of their teams this October. Pitching in Game 3 tonight will be Max Scherzer, who is coming off the IL for this start. He last pitched September 12th, so it's been over a month, and he did not make any rehab starts. He's just coming back. He has said, and the Rangers have also said, Bruce Bochy has also said that like they thought about bringing him back for the DS, and the reason they didn't was if they had to put him back on the IL, he would have been unavailable then for the CS, because if you're on the IL, you're not available for the next round. I think they're saying that as a way of being like, see, could have been ready a few days ago. We'll find out today if that is true, and if he's ready now. I feel very anxious. But excited to see how Max Scherzer does. I want him to do well, because I want him to be happy, and because I want everyone else to be safe and okay. No, I take no pleasure in saying that it gives me concern that they are starting him with so little data on how he's going to do. He has, in the last couple of years, really struggled in his last few starts whenever they've come, whether that's been in the postseason or at the very end of the regular season. He is 38, and I'm excited to see, or 39. He's 39, we should say. He's always exciting in the postseason, and his ability to rise to an occasion is what makes him Max Scherzer. And so when that ability is diminished, it is like particularly, I don't know, disappointing to watch, because he's like a really interesting main character in baseball who has a really specific persona, and a lot of that is tied up in like doing anything it takes to succeed at the highest level, especially when it comes to October. How are you feeling? Are you going to watch?
Depends on how the plane Wi-Fi is, but
right.
Yes, I will certainly watch Max Scherzer try to tame October again. I did see that this is in the past 5 years, which the only one he didn't play in was the COVID shortened playoffs. He has pitched for 4 different teams in 4 different playoffs, which is something.
Yeah.
But yeah, his recent playoff history is concerning in that a lot of times he has not had the stamina to pitch in the only way he seems to know how to pitch, which is like a crazy person. And that is how I'm sure he's going to try to come out and go 175%. And we will see if the Rangers know how to tame that, or if they, have him on a more strict workload than some previous teams did. I think it would be best for all involved if they're pretty conservative with his workload and kind of build in the idea that he's probably the best option on an inning by inning basis for 3 to 4 innings, but probably not for 5 to 6 innings.
Yeah. Well, they also, both he and Bochy yesterday referenced the idea of like, he hasn't thrown that many pitches. Like his bullpen starts or his sim games that he's made, they haven't been 100 pitches. So like he is not going to pitch into the sixth like Jordan Montgomery and Nathan Eovaldi have done, which in addition to affecting Max Scherzer is going to affect the Rangers, who have managed to deploy their bullpen in such a way that it has not hurt them thus far this postseason. And why they continue to use Aroldis Chapman is beyond me, but they've worked around his struggles largely by turning to Jose Leclerc, who I wrote about after game 2. Jose Leclerc is the longest continuous tenured member of the Rangers roster. He and Martin Perez are the only two guys who were on the team in 2016, which is the last time they made the postseason. Jose Leclerc did not pitch in that postseason because he was 22. Since then, he's had a journey. He's had some ups and downs. He had Tommy John surgery. This year alone, he's had some ups and downs. He was the closer when they broke camp. He lost the closer job. He was dealing with some like neck injury stuff at the time. Then the bullpen was really, really bad, as you may have heard. And then just like circled back around to using him in the closer role. And he has pitched in the 9th inning of every game so far this postseason. And as previously mentioned, they have won every game this postseason, which is very exciting for him. He was a delight to talk to. He talked about how he like truly never expected to be here. He was like, I didn't even expect to make the majors. He's like, I signed for the signing bonus and had no dreams of. I was like, what is, I was like, did you ever dream about like being on the mound in the World Series? I said, no, I did not. I did not even never dream of really pitching in front of fans. So he's having an incredible postseason. And the rest of the bullpen is also like keeping it together. They're all, Bruce Bochy is pulling the right strings thus far, even when he pulls no strings, which is not backfired yet. And well, that is the question going into tonight, really, is like, it is as interesting to see how Bruce Bochy manages it as it is to see how Max Scherzer navigates it, because not having a quick hook has served Bruce Bochy really well so far this postseason. And that is at least because the starting pitching is good, if not also because the bullpen is bad. We don't know, because they've been good when they've been used. And tonight will be a real test of that. We should say, though, that maybe even if he's mediocre and the bullpen is mediocre, they might be all right, because the lineup has been great this postseason. The Phillies have the highest WRC plus at 148, which is a lot higher than the second highest at 118. But the second highest is the Texas Rangers, who are also second in runs scored. That's a counting stat. So obviously the teams that are left still have the most runs scored. But the Rangers lineup has been really, really good. We talked about how like the bottom of the lineup has been good. The top lineup's a star-powered lineup. And they have a lot of really good rookies. Are you interested in how good rookies have been this year holistically, but this postseason in particular? Like Corbin Carroll, Josh Young, Evan Carter, other teams probably too. Most of those guys. But the rookies have been really good.
I think rookie hitters in general have gotten very advanced. Gunnar Henderson was the Orioles' best player in that brief series that they lost to the Rangers. I think there's just a level of sophistication with rookies that a lot of the time they are the best prospects who make this stage, because they're very talented and are going to wind up having really good careers. I don't know exactly if there's anything to this. I do wonder if there's less information available on them in terms of how to attack them. Certainly that shouldn't be the case for Corbin Carroll. He's been playing all year. But if you wanted to tell me that no one knows exactly what to do with Evan Carter, who's been in the majors for like a week and a half, I would believe that.
I think that actually Dusty Baker has said something exactly like that, which is interesting, because I'm curious if you noticed this being at the games. There's a lot of advanced scouts in the postseason because there are fewer teams and the games are more important. So teams have a lot of advanced scouts at the games of the teams that they might face down the road. So it'll be interesting to see how teams adjust to the rookies and the rookies adjust back. Because I think you're right. I think part of it is that the games matter so much more. And so your attack plan on a particular person has to be not necessarily based on like huge swaths of information that are telling you like average trends. You got to be like, how do they do in these very particular circumstances? Like, what is their approach when the team is down versus like when the team is up, or when the guy before them hit a home run? Those kinds of things are better achieved through scouting than through data. So I think it'll be interesting to see how pitchers adjust to how all the rookie hitters have been really, really hot. You're right. The other like less fun part of that is definitely just that like young dudes are super prepared now because they've had like professional training since they were 16 or something. And they all have like, you know, private hitting coaches who are turning them into little contact monsters. All right. I have a question that I warned you I was going to ask you. And then you said you would think about it and come up with an answer. And then I didn't think about it and come up with an answer. So we're going to let you go first. Zach, has this been a good postseason?
I think it's a little bit of a fraught question, obviously, which is why you're asking it, because of the upsets and sort of the unexpected teams in the two CS matchups. Mostly that the Diamondbacks are in it and that the best teams in baseball all got knocked out. There are 3 teams with 90 wins and 1 team with 84 wins that are, one of them's going to win the World Series. That's the gist of it. I think, honestly, I'm going to say no, but it's not because of that. It's because we haven't had the back and forth. We have not had shifts in fortunes. We have not had comebacks and collapses. We have not had really many classic games. I mean, that's the reason. It's not that there were upsets. I think the upsets are often the best part. Last year, the upsets were amazing. I mean, if you followed the Padres run through the NL, that was really excellent. Same with the Phillies run, with it eventually collided. That was a series between 2 lower seeds, and that turned out to be an epic battle. This has not been that. Even the Diamondbacks, it was amazing when they demolished the Dodgers, but also if you stopped watching those games in the 4th inning, you didn't miss anything. Because they just blew them off the face of the earth and then held on to the lead. So I'm going to go with no. I think it is redeemable if we get either these CS matchups that start to have some like any other direction besides team that wins game 1 steamrolls to series victory. Or it could just be that the World Series turns into an epic matchup. I think Phillies Rangers obviously is the most likely scenario right now, and that feels like a real 2 teams of destiny run into each other situation, which could be really fun. Or it could be like this Phillies Diamondback series that also felt like that, and the Phillies are crushing them. So, I think it's not about the upsets. It's not about who eventually wins. It's just about, we need a little bit more...
it's about the journey, not the
intermediate drama.
Okay, I shouldn't have let you go first because you said what I wanted to say now, but you said it pretty thoroughly. I agree. The best comeback game has been the Braves win. That then was immediately like, oh, forget about that. They're not going to win any other.
No resonance.
Yes. I agree completely that like I am unbothered by who advances as long as how they get there is interesting. Frankly, like the Astros are the least upsetty team, and I would be happy to have them, but I would also be happy to have like the Rangers Phillies in the World Series. I don't need it to be the most obvious answer that we saw coming from like October 1st in terms of like the 2 best teams meeting in the World Series. But you're right. It's been not a super classic, no one, right? Other than that Braves game, no one game has felt like, wow, this is really like, this is where the team turned it around. Because they did not turn it around after, like, you know what I mean? It's like, that would have been, if they hadn't talked, maybe they would have. But, right, we haven't gotten like, this is how they pulled it off. Because it's like, it's always just been the team. They're like, they look better in game 1. So that's probably how they pulled it off. Like, I do think if we are headed towards a Phillies Rangers World Series, I like those. I'm interested in both of those teams and how they got here, both this month and this year and the last 5 years or whatever. So like I could get very into that World Series matchup. But again, I would need it to be then an actually good World Series.
Mm-hmm.
I do think of the 4 teams that are left, setting aside even the fact that both series are currently 2-0, that I am most interested in a Phillies Rangers lineup for the this month, this year, the last 5 years type narratives. No offense to the Diamondbacks. I just don't need to see if they can beat an equally kind of surprising, but definitely better Rangers team. You know what I mean? I mean, maybe if the D-backs take down the Astros in the World Series, that would be pretty dramatic.
The Diamondbacks will be back. It's they're a super young team that is just very surprising to be here. I don't really doubt that they will make it back to something in the near future.
Right, and I only care about the Astros as the final boss of baseball, and so I could get into a Phillies Astros, except for that's a rematch. I don't know that I need exactly the same series that we had last year. Okay, well. Next time we'll talk to you, it'll be when we do know what the World Series is, and hopefully it'll be fun. And then we can do, when we get to the World Series, and it's only 2 teams, and it's teams that you and I have both been watching necessarily because they came out of the CS series that we're covering, we will be able to do a more matchup-y type preview pod, and not just telling you what happened in the games that just happened. All right, that's all we've got for you this week. I'm going to keep covering the ALCS. You're going to keep covering the NLCS. And you can follow us on the various socials. Thanks to producer Brett for making this episode look and sound great. If you've made it this far, subscribe to the podcast, the YouTube channel, leave us a 5-star review, tell a friend, and we'll be back before the World Series starts, whatever week that is, with another episode of The Bandwagon.